There's a certain kind of person who can walk into a room and know within 30 seconds that something is wrong. Not because anyone said anything, not because there's a fight happening. The music is on, people are laughing, someone's refilling their drink. But this person, they've already clocked it. The way someone laughed a half beat too late. The way two people haven't made eye contact once all night. The way a sentence ended just a little too cheerfully. And here's the thing. They're right. 9 times out of 10, they're right. Most people would call that a gift, a superpower. But you know what's interesting? The people who actually have this ability, they don't call it a gift. They call it exhausting. Because this kind of awareness doesn't have a clock out time. It doesn't shut off when you get home, when you climb into bed, when you finally have a moment to yourself. It just keeps running, keeps processing, keeps replaying that thing someone said at dinner. Not what they said, but how they said it. And why there was a 2-second pause before they said it. And what that pause probably meant. And whether you should bring it up. And whether bringing it up would make you look paranoid. And whether not bringing it up is why you never feel truly close to anyone. That's not a superpower. That's a trap. Today, we're going to decode the psychology of people who are hyper-aware, why they became this way, what it cost them, and how they can stop being swallowed by their own mind. Where does this come from? Psychology generally splits hyper-aware people into 2 groups. The first group is simply wired this way from birth. Researchers call them highly sensitive persons, or HSPs, people who carry a trait known as sensory processing sensitivity. Their nervous system is factory set to process the world at a finer resolution than everyone else. Colors feel more vivid. Music hits deeper. A crowded grocery store isn't just busy. It's genuinely overwhelming. They didn't choose this. It's biological. But the second group, and this is the one most people fall into, didn't start this way. They were trained into it. Neuroscientists call this state hypervigilance, and it almost always traces back to an emotionally unpredictable environment. Usually childhood. Picture a kid who grew up in a house where the mood could shift without warning, where a good morning could flip into a tense afternoon for no apparent reason. That child couldn't afford to be a kid. They had to become a sensor system. They learned the specific sound of footsteps coming down the hallway and what that sound meant. They could read the angle of someone's shoulders and know whether it was safe to ask for something. Biologically, what happened is this. Their amygdala, the brain's built-in alarm system, got activated so repeatedly that it rewired itself to stay on. It sent a message deep into the nervous system. This environment is not safe. Keep scanning. Keep predicting. Don't get caught off guard. Nobody taught them this. Their brain did it automatically to protect them. And here's the cruel irony. It worked. The scanning worked. It helped them survive. But then, they grew up. And they carried that alarm system right into their adult life. Into their job, their relationships, their friendships. And now, it's misfiring constantly. Not because they're broken, because the shield that once protected them never learned how to come off. Sign 1. Living inside a constant equation. For most people, a conversation is just a conversation. For a hyper-aware person, a conversation is data. Here's a real example. Their manager sends a Slack message at 4:47 p.m. Hey, do you have a few minutes to connect tomorrow? For most people, that's a meeting request. For them, that message lands like a fire alarm. They read it 3 times. Something about the wording feels off. Too casual or not casual enough. They try to remember if they made any mistakes this week. They wonder if the "hey" felt distant. They consider whether a few minutes is code for something brief and bad versus something long and worse. The thing is, the meeting is probably nothing. But their brain has already run a full investigation. This is partly explained by something called the default mode network, the brain system involved in self-referential thinking and internal reflection. In most people, this network activates mainly during rest or daydreaming. But in hyper-aware people, it tends to run hot all the time. Half of them is in the room, participating, holding eye contact. The other half is taking notes, cross-referencing details, filing observations for later analysis. By the end of a normal Tuesday, they're exhausted, not from anything that happened, but from the invisible marathon their brain just ran. Sign 2. The mirror turned inward. It's not just other people they analyze, it's themselves. Psychology has a term for the ability to think about your own thinking, metacognition. It's a capacity controlled by the prefrontal cortex, and everyone has some version of it. But for hyper-aware people, metacognition doesn't turn off. It doesn't even pause. Here's what this actually looks like. They're at a party, someone tells a joke, they laugh, genuinely laugh. And then, within 1 second, a part of their brain floats up to the ceiling, looks down at them and starts evaluating. Was that laugh too loud? Did it sound authentic? Did laughing that hard make them seem like they were performing? You know what's interesting? It's not anxiety. It's actually self-surveillance. There's a difference. Anxiety worries about the future. This is something else. A real-time audit of your own existence, running constantly in the background. The result? They can be fully present in a moment and totally absent from it at the same time. They don't miss a step, but they lose the feeling of dancing. Sign 3. They've seen behind the curtain. Deep awareness does something to relationships that's hard to undo. When you've spent years reading between the lines, you get very good at seeing the space between what people say and what they mean. Psychology calls this theory of mind, the ability to model other people's internal states. Hyper-aware people develop this ability to an almost uncomfortable degree. They can tell when someone's kindness has a price tag. They can hear the insecurity underneath someone's confidence. They notice when an apology is designed to end a conflict rather than actually resolve one. They see the favor hiding inside the compliment. This creates what I'd call a quiet kind of grief. Not bitterness. They don't become cynical or cruel, but they lose something. The ability to receive things at face value. A friend says, "I'm so proud of you," and instead of just feeling warm, part of their brain is already asking why now. What's about to change? What does this person need from me? And here's the loneliness that comes with that. They can be surrounded by people who love them and still feel profoundly alone because no one else seems to see what they're seeing. Everyone's watching the movie. They're reading the script. Sign 4. Empathy they can't turn off. For most people, empathy is something you choose to engage. Someone tells you something painful. You shift into listening mode. You feel with them. For a hyper-aware person, empathy isn't a mode. It's a state. They walk into a staff meeting and nobody says anything, but they can feel the tension between two coworkers, like a weather system moving through the room. They sit next to a stranger on a flight who seems fine, perfectly fine, but something about the way the stranger is gripping the armrest makes their own chest tighten. Neuroscience points to mirror neurons as part of what's happening here. The brain systems that activate when we observe someone else's emotional or physical experience. It's not just sympathy, it's actually absorption. They don't just understand another person's pain, they carry it. The practical result of this? They become emotional regulators for everyone around them. The friend who always knows what to say. The colleague who can read the room when no one else can. People are drawn to them for exactly this reason. But the cost is that by the end of the day, they're carrying everyone else's emotional weather inside their own body. And almost nobody asks them how they're doing. Because from the outside, they always seem like they have it together. Sign 5. When awareness moves into the body. Hyper-awareness doesn't stay in the mind. It settles into the nervous system. There's a concept in neuroscience called interoception, the brain's ability to sense its own body's internal state, processed through a region called the insular cortex. In hyperaware people, interoception tends to be extraordinarily sensitive. Here's what this looks like in real life. They drink a large coffee and their heart speeds up. Normal, just caffeine. But their nervous system doesn't read it as caffeine. It reads it as threat signal incoming. The faster heartbeat gets flagged. The body releases cortisol. Now they're actually more activated, which creates more physical sensations, which the brain flags again. A loop starts, and it's brutal. The result is that these people can feel on edge even when objectively nothing is wrong. They walk around with a low-level hum of anxiety that doesn't seem attached to any specific thing, because it isn't attached to a specific thing. It's attached to everything, all at once. Sign 6. Trying to predict their way out of pain. This is the sign that does the most long-term damage. And it's the one that looks, from the outside, like responsibility or intelligence. Hyperaware people operate from a deep, unspoken belief. If I can predict the worst possible outcome, it won't hurt as much when it arrives. So they run simulations constantly. What if this relationship ends? How would I handle that? What if this project fails? How would I explain it? What if that person pulls away? What does that mean about me? They're essentially trying to pre-grieve every loss before it happens, so they'll never be caught off guard. Psychology calls this analysis paralysis, but it runs deeper than just overthinking. It's a survival strategy that worked when they were small. Predict the danger before it hits. Now being applied to a life where the danger is much subtler and the cost of constant scanning is much higher. The cruelest part? In trying to stay ahead of pain, they slowly step outside their own life. They're not in the moment. They're managing the moment from a safe distance, like a stage director who never actually gets to perform. What can they actually do? Here's the thing. You cannot ask a hyper-aware person to become less aware. That's like asking someone with perfect pitch to stop hearing the notes. It's not a switch they can flip. But, and this is what changes everything, awareness and absorption are not the same thing. You can see clearly without carrying everything you see. The people who learn to live well with this level of perception tend to anchor themselves in 3 ideas. First, not everything is about them. When someone responds slowly to a text, sometimes they're just tired. When a coworker walks past without smiling, they might have a headache. The brain's first instinct is to make things personal. The work is to create a beat of pause before that interpretation becomes fact. Second, not every feeling needs to be solved. When anxiety shows up, that tight chest, that low hum, they don't have to immediately excavate the cause. They can simply name it. Oh, there's that feeling again. Observe it without judgment. Let it move through rather than building a case around it. Third, not every insight is theirs to act on. They may see someone's insecurity clearly, but they don't have to become that person's therapist. They may sense a relationship is in trouble, but stepping back is a valid response. Awareness is a tool, not a responsibility. When they start practicing this kind of selective letting go, something remarkable shifts. Their awareness doesn't disappear. It just stops driving them. They can feel the energy in a room without being swept into it. They can notice a dynamic without needing to fix it. They move from using their awareness to predict, to using it to be present. And that is a completely different life. The world doesn't get simpler. People don't get less complicated. But the weight lifts, not because they finally figured everything out, but because they stopped trying to carry every equation at once. If you're someone who reads between lines automatically, who absorbs the mood of a room the second you walk in, who replays conversations not because you want to, but because your brain insists, you are not broken. You're not too sensitive. You've built one of the most finely tuned perception systems in the human experience. The work isn't to dismantle it. The work is to stop letting it run your life unsupervised. Leave a comment with the sign that felt most like you. I'm genuinely curious. Is it the constant analysis? The empathy that won't switch off? The simulations you run before things even happen? And if this video gave you even one useful lens on yourself, share it with someone who might need it. Someone who's been tired in a way they couldn't explain. That tiredness has a name now. Subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. See you then. See you.